right. Want to start by thanking everyone for coming in today, and also Brian, Sam for hosting this meetup, and Matt for giving us really amazing space, and also Christy for that awesome talk earlier. For those of us who thought of this, just show of hands, who's thought of this before? Like they've asked themselves this, they've said it, they've heard it. Yeah, put your hands up. I'm about to make fun of you. Okay, no. I think of this every single time I get rejected. Like literally every single time. My ego is massive. And it's a pretty surprise that I found someone who's willing to marry me next month. But I ask myself this every single time. Anyway, so right now I work as a design recruiter, but prior to that, last year I used to be a senior staff designer at Boston Dynamics. I led the design for our first warehouse robot, which would unload boxes from the trailer. So I designed UI, the strategy to figure out how do we get this into warehouses. And for our first year, we sold about $15 million worth of robots. So fairly successful. Our customers include H&M, Gap, and DHL, Nike, etc. So yeah, fun stuff. And I got pretty burned down last year, decided to go into recruiting, and I think that kind of gives me a fairly unique perspective, because typically recruiters don't come from design, and there's always this kind of wall where you get really frustrated working with recruiters, and go into it, kind of like dispel a lot of my myths, my assumptions, and realize, wow, I am turning into what I hate. So the question is, why don't good designers get hired? And that's kind of something that hurts all of us. Like whenever we get rejected from a role, we think, hey, why didn't they pick me? I was perfect for it, I have the experience for it, I thought I did well in the interview. You really have no data, right? Like, they don't really give you feedback. And this is kind of the thesis that I'm working with right now, which is your ability to find a job is different from your ability to do the job. And many of us think, hey, we are very good at doing the job day to day. But honestly speaking, your ability to find a job is a complete separate and different set of skill sets. In fact, one of them, finding a job, it creates value for you, the candidate, whereas doing the work, the day-to-day work, creates value for the company. I'm liking this animation, by the way, because this is the first time I've seen Canva. And so being a good designer does not mean you're hireable. And I love using this word. It's not even a real word. I just made it up. Hireable. Like when people say, hey, Matt's a really good, sorry, I don't know why Matt came off my head, but Matt's a really good designer. And you automatically think, well, Matt must be really hireable. Like Google, FANG companies really want to hire Matt. And the question really comes down to, what do you even mean by a good designer? Like, what does good even mean? Does that mean you're not evil? You help people and you do good design that's beautiful, or you are easy to work with? What does that even mean? And that's so subjective. So what I really want to do is separate good from hireable. And separating is actually surprisingly difficult to do. So a lot of things have changed. Sorry, this might be a little bit small, but 5 years ago, if you asked me how should you prepare for the future as a designer, I would have given you very different advice than I would now. 5 years ago, I would say, hey, you really need to learn about how to talk to users, do really good research, you got a strategy, kind of become a PM a little bit, and don't worry too much about visual design, because your job as a UX designer is to really, create really good information architecture and wireframes, etc. And I was completely wrong. I just, whoever listened to me 3 to 5 years ago, I'm really sorry. Like, my career has kind of gone to shit too. So, we all lost. So, left columns then, right columns now. 3 to 5 years ago, we had, I would say, a more balanced tiers of experience. You have junior, senior, manager, directors, and nowadays it's a super senior ICs. If you look at layoffs, like it's pretty bad. Like if you're a design manager right now, I'm really sorry, because I can't help you. Like I have 0 design manager roles right now. All my roles are virtually super senior ICs. If you're a junior or mid-level, I'm also very sorry. It's just our infrastructure, like collectively speaking, the design community, like the senior designers have failed everyone, because we did not build infrastructures. We didn't fight hard enough to make sure that there is a viable, sustainable pipeline. And a few years ago, talking to users, standard research, super important. In interviews, everybody always asks me, how many users do you talk to for this project? And what kind of research do you do? Nowadays, they don't really ask me how many users. It's more about, are you wowing me with how beautiful your designs are? And when you talk about research, it's not generative. It's not about figuring out, what should we be building? It's more like, did what we design pass muster? Did users like it? It's kind of BS if you think about it. And a few years ago, if you look at portfolios, if you look at older portfolios, you see a lot of processes. Like, this is our design process. This is a double diamond. This is design thinking. This is the wireframing part. This is talking to users, etc. And that's your portfolio, right? We can't do that anymore. If you're a hiring manager or you're a recruiter, you see that and you're like, okay, this is kind of a junior-ish candidate because they went to, I'm so sorry, General Assembly. Whoever went there, very sorry, but you went to General Assembly, they taught you the process. So everybody has the same cookie cutter process. It kind of creates this bias against people who are talking about process. Now it's all about output, like what kind of beautiful designs did you make? What is the outcome that you created? Implementing team structure and processes, that's kind of the mark of a senior designer years ago. It's like, did you come in and change how we do design? If you did that, you're a senior. If you couldn't do that, you didn't know what you were doing. Now we're talking about complexity. We're talking about taking a product from 0 to 1 and beyond. And I blame freaking Peter Thiel for 0 to 1. Like these freaking, I would say the people who are like the venture capitalists, like whenever they write about design, like that becomes the meta of what designers should aspire to. I give you multiple examples, not just Peter Thiel, but like bit scaling, like anything that, like we designers, we're kind of beholden, or we're like playthings, or we're the little marionettes that, these people with a lot of money can just come out, fuck around with. And you used to about information architecture and wireframing, that's like a mark of, a designer, right? Now it's like, can you deal with complexity, ambiguity? And this has a lot to do with the fact that, and I'm going to get slammed for it a little bit, but I would contend that most product managers out in the field are pretty underexperienced. All of them are like ex-project managers, business and analytics, and you're kind of coming in to do the PM job as a designer. So the term they use is, can you deal with ambiguity? And really you're just like, okay, so you don't know what the fuck it is you're doing, so you figure it out and do the designs, great. So that's kind of the shift that I believe we're seeing right now. So let me get you in the mood with a thought exercise, because when I say like, we need to kind of talk about how hireable you are, it's something that is kind of difficult for designers to shift into, even though our whole shtick is we need to understand the users, we need to get into the shoes of the people we're designing for, but for some reason, like we cannot do that for our lives when it comes to our portfolios. We just can't. It's like a complete blind spot. It's like that Black Mirror episode where people commit crimes and then they just get like ghosted, like people just can't see them anymore. That's kind of how it is. It's a great episode with John Hamm. So this thought exercise I do is, pretend you're the CEO of your startup called, I guess for me, I'm CEO of Hang. And the product is designer as a service. I call it DaaS, or SaaS, whatever. AKA your candidacy as a job seeker. And your customer is the hiring manager, your users are your future coworkers, and your okarunis, as I like to call it. Your customer buys your product, and the users continue with their monthly DaaS subscriptions because they find the product to be valuable. That is your goal. So when you think of it this way, you start to ask yourself, as a CEO, you get to decide how big the teams are, who to hire, who to fire. You have complete control. So your startup, your candidacy, this product you're creating, who is creating this product? How do you figure out the ratio between designers, product managers, engineers, marketing, sales, customer success, HR, etc. I would contend that most designers, it's something like 30, 30, 30, or like design product engineers is like one poor marketing person, like an intern who's being, slaving away under the watchful eyes of the designers. And there's no sales, there's no customer success, there's no HR to help you replenish or redistribute the roles. And you really have to think about how do you mold your own startup? Like, how do you do this? And this kind of helped me shift my thinking, because originally I was very focused on design, product, and engineers were just executing, doing the work. Very little marketing. I was on LinkedIn. I didn't really go out. I hated speaking to people. I'm terrified of being in front of people. And I hated sales. I hated networking people. And yeah, it made me, I felt like it made me a decent designer, because I was always focused on doing the work, but I would just, I sucked at interviews, and I wasn't really good at positioning myself, and I couldn't see why, because nobody like sat me down and told me why I sucked so much. So I'm here to tell you why you suck so much. So the question you want to ask yourself, is there a healthy balance of team makeup? Is every team strategically aligned? Are we doing the right things? Are we doing the same things together? A lot of us are not. Like, one team is off doing some bullshit project that they think it's fun, another group is like goofing off, and one core team is like doing all the work. Are you relying on your biggest customer, your employer? That's kind of a really sensitive question right now. What if they leave you? Your biggest customer, they just say, fuck off, we don't really want to, we don't need you anymore. How long would it take you to replace your biggest customer? Tough questions. What if they leave? My favorite Toy Story, Toy Story number 2. So the question then becomes, how bad is the current market? I'm laughing, but it's not great. And I
yes.
I made this with AI. And by the way, I love The Bachelor. I love The Bachelor. That Bachelorette. It's like it's a weird guilty pleasure. I love the Ashley season, Emily, and Brad Womack. So whoever, nobody else.
Horace?
What is going on? Joel is on the floor. Like, is this actually happening?
Seriously? I am literally in a state of shock at this point. Maybe this guy is a little bit better at manipulation than I thought he was.
You wanted more money. What I learned about you tonight is you're selfish, unkind, and a liar. Your offer is rescinded. So get out. Thomas betrayed my trust. He manipulated my emotions. You don't get to use me as your competing offer to whatever your goal is. Today, not tonight, not ever. Gentlemen, I'm sorry, but if you did not receive next steps, please say your goodbyes. Someone who's here to be here for me. Someone who came here wanting to do the work. I'm not going to give up an offer to someone who I don't see a future with. I'm looking forward to week after week, all I'm saying is be here for me, be here for love, be here for the company that you're not. Please just leave. I really can't emphasize enough how badly I need you to be here for the right reasons. Plain and simple. There is some part of me that feels empowered. I can trust my dad, and now I know that every decision I make is the right decision for me. I was feeling that his intentions weren't pure. Now I didn't know why, but then on the polar opposite end, my gut's telling me explore this, and I have to follow my heart. Have you been laid off?
I was not severe at all, for real.
David, bro,
I literally just walked in really quick. Did you hear?
get a robe on. I can come back another time. room because you'll be starting your first day. Yeah, well, get some rest. Good night.
Do it, Crane. Yeah.
Thank you.
So the only lessons you get out of this is that being an ex-FANG designer is fucking great. And if you can work for a FANG, that'll be awesome. If you can. It makes it a lot easier during the job hunt. I got some motivational quotes from CEOs to help you feel a little bit better after. You know about Andy Owens. She's great. And this is James Clark. Sorry. If you watch his interview, I mean not his interview, his town hall meeting, it's absolutely unhinged. He talked about how one of the leaders in his company sold their family dog in order to show how dedicated they were. So you can tell like the market is very much turning right now. I've been doing a lot of salary negotiation coaching for other people. That's something I love to do on the side. And in the past 2 years of me doing it, we never had a single rescinded offer until last month. We had 2. So it's getting a little bad. There's a lot of fear. I'm not saying you shouldn't negotiate. I actually think you should negotiate harder during down markets. But things are a little bit different now. This is real. I did not make this up. This is the CEO of a Better.
What?
Yeah, you think I'm making this shit up, but it's fun. And we all know about that. CEOs are just completely unhinged and disconnected. Okay, so back to our topic. There is a massive increase of applicants for pretty much every single role out there. You probably noticed that. You know, it used to be like 50 applicants per role. Now you're seeing 100, 200, 300 sometimes. I've seen like upwards of 500. And what that means is if you look at the interview process on the other side, like hiring managers and recruiters, you see it as a funnel, right? You have a ton of applicants for the screener stage. You cut through that, and then you have fewer people for the first round, then fewer people second round, and then final on site and offer, right? So you go from something like 50 people to say 20, like 50 people to like 5 to 10, and then you're eventually on site you have like 2 or 3 maximum. Really just most of the time just 1. That's before on the left. Now it's on the right. We're talking about many, many more people. However, hiring teams, recruiting teams still have a lot of, they have issues because they've been affected by layoffs. So they have less time to do all the work of screening people. So when we think about interviewing or hiring, we think, hey, they're going to do their best to find the best designer candidate within the pool of however many people. But really, it doesn't work that way. They're just trying to go through enough people to find the best people within that small group. The analogy I can give you is, let's say you only have 2 hours to find the best restaurant in your neighborhood. There might be 20 to 30 restaurants in your neighborhood. 2 hours is not enough to try lunch and dinner at every single place, right? You can't do that. So you can either split it up into like 5 minutes each at every single place, but your stomach is limited, your time is limited, you can't order everything, right? So what do you do instead? You go on Yelp, and you order it by feedback, by number of stars, and you choose the top 3 restaurants, and you go through these 3 in your 2 hours, and you figure out the top 1. So the remaining 17 restaurants might actually be quite good, but you're just trying to find good enough. That's kind of the point here. They're not trying to find the best designer out of the bunch, just good enough within the time allotted to them. There's not enough time most of the time. So the fat curvy funnel that I showed you on the right, the biggest hurdle is going to be at the start of the funnel. That's why being an ex-FANG designer really helps. So when you think about it, if you have like 200 applicants, you only have time to screen 30 or 50 of them, then you might just think, okay, let me just, what's the best way to tell if this designer is most likely good or not? If they worked at a FANG or blue chip company, great, put them through. You don't have to look at the rest of the resume then. I'm so sorry, everyone looks really depressed right now. Time is the recruiter's most valuable commodity. Think of it this way, the more time they have, the more hiring they can get done. Okay, it's very much about output for most recruiters. So as a candidate, your question then becomes, how do you create a 60 to 90 second hook? Having FANG and blue chip experience definitely helps, right? How do you convince someone in a very short amount of time that you are the best or the right candidate? So a lot of things you can do. On LinkedIn, you should be creating content, you should be creating connections, you should be building relationships with people. And it doesn't mean just like hit them up and say, hey, can you review my portfolio? Can you chat? You want to build genuine relationships. So what everyone's doing here is wonderful. You're chit-chatting, you're talking to people, you're getting to know each other. And that's kind of how you find jobs nowadays, because this is the best way to cut through the noise, right? They might not have 2 seconds for you if they don't know you, but if they know who you are, they can say, okay, well, let's take a closer look at you. And this is kind of how I found my first job and part of my more recent jobs as well. So one thing you want to do is also when you talk to hiring managers, they don't have to be hiring right now, right? Because hiring managers, they share some similarities across the board. You should be asking them, what are some of the biggest problems you and your team are trying to solve? Even though they're not hiring right now, I would say most of their problems are pretty similar across the board. There are only so many different problems they can solve. And if you speak the language of what their problem is, your chances go way up, especially on LinkedIn. So also you want to really focus on unique value proposition. What sets you apart? What makes you better than 99% of other designers out there? Because we're all very different, right? We don't need to be the best at everything. We just need to be really good at 1 or 2 things and hope that the hiring manager or the company that needs those 1 or 2 things are able to identify you early on. So in other words, you want to get good reviews on Yelp so that you can get more people to come to you. So I wrote something about leveraging your unique value proposition. And what does that mean? You have 3 Venn diagrams, 3 circles in the Venn diagram. Your skill as a designer, what the company needs, and other designer skills. And you want to be in a win section, right? Because if you have the same skills that other designer, and the company also needs you, then kind of a neutral area, because you're all kind of really similar. If you have the same skills as other designers, but you're not solving the company's needs and problems, then that's a loss. You're doing something that nobody needs. And if you don't have the skills and other designers do, then that's a loss as well. So you want to be in the win column. Only you can solve the customer's problems. Your salary will be a factor of the cost of the problem and the value of their goals. What does that mean exactly? So has anybody ever dealt with emergency plumbers? I had a clog in my shower the other day, and the person came over, fixed everything in 20 minutes. I shit you not, he charged me $700. So why did he charge me $700? Is his time worth, $2,100 per hour? No, he knows that the cost of this problem is so high for me because I want to be able to take showers that I'm willing to pay him $700. And also, it's not my money, it's my landlord's money. So. Again, you want to understand power dynamics and the leverages that you have. So if the hiring manager doesn't care that much about money, then you can really push that during negotiation. But that's a completely different topic. For your resume, which is just another version of LinkedIn, in my opinion, you want to describe outcomes and achievements, not outputs and deliverables. What does that mean? You're talking about solving people's problems. You're not just saying, I create wireframes, I do visual designs, I do design systems. No, you're saying, I help deliver the design system for this company, which enable us to cut down the cost of development by 30%, saving us $500,000 over the 2 years I was working there. So if I'm saving $500,000, you should be paying me like $300,000, because that's clear net positive. And you want the resume to be scrapable and easy to read. So what does that mean? Don't use Figma. Figma generates text that's basically not great, not very parsable for ATS or applicant tracking systems like Workday, Lever, Greenhouse, etc. You want to use something like, saying this, Google Documents, Word documents. That's a little bit better. Canva, not so great either. If you want to see if it's scrapable or not, what you want to do is find a job that uses Workday or any of these other systems that scrape resumes. You don't have to apply to a job, you just need to upload your resume and see what gets populated automatically in the field. If everything gets populated, great, you've done a good job. If nothing gets populated, that means you have to manually enter in information, which is really bad because your goal as a candidate is to minimize the amount of time you spend on each application. The less time you spend on it, the more applications you can get through, the more chances of you getting a job. Oh my God, everyone looks so depressed right now. I'm really sorry. I thought I could give you all antidepressants afterwards. So you have okarumis and kakuis. You want to really focus on outcomes. And I want to be like Steve Ballmer, like if you're old enough about Steve Ballmer, developers. I'm going to jump up and down and say outcomes. Focus on outcomes as much as possible. Your portfolio, so ease of access. Recruiters will all, if you follow recruiters, especially Jared, what's that guy's name? Fred, yeah, we all know him, right? Beautiful hair. I don't have hair like him. He complains about this all the time, rightfully so, that a lot of designers don't include password to their portfolio in their applications or their resumes. So make sure it is easy to access or take off password access. But as a designer, I get it why you need passwords, right? It's kind of like brown bagging your alcoholic drinking. It's like, make it a not, like you're doing something wrong, but we're gonna let that go because it makes sense. So make sure it's easy, available. If somebody has to spend like more than 5 minutes finding your password, unless you're from a bank company, they're not gonna spend any more time. It's all about investment, right? Your portfolio must pass a 90-second eye test. This is really disappointing to hear, especially come from an ex-designer. But when I see your portfolio, I literally spend 90 seconds looking through it. I don't read anything. I'm like illiterate. I'm just like, oh, this looks beautiful, great. This is some issues. This also has a lot to do with the fact that we are so focused on visual design nowadays. Not great, but that's just the reality. We really care about visual design. Good, beautiful visuals. I'm repeating myself. Clear information architecture, which means you are communicating information at the right level at the right time. Because if you just have massive blocks of text, all the same font size, same color, etc., then I don't know what to read. I'm going to ignore everything. But if you focus on a few key details, like what kind of problems you're solving, what your role is, and what the outcomes are, that's super, super, super important. I cannot stress that enough. So you want to focus on a clear problem statement. And I wrote something about this before as well, because most of the time people conflate problems with solutions. So they say, the problem is that people don't have an easy way of checking information or viewing a dashboard. That's not a problem, that's a freaking solution that you've disguised as the problem. Like if you're a senior designer, you see that, you're like, okay, this person doesn't understand problem statements. Like they're not gonna have really good design, not design, but like product sense. And that's super important right now as well, going back to the point of, that many product managers out there. And this is also really not fair, but you wanna be a lead / staff designer right now, because that's the majority of roles that I'm seeing right now. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the companies who are hiring right now are early stage companies, seed level, Series A companies. They're the ones who have funding. They're hiring the first designer. They want somebody super, super senior, and that's going to be a founding designer on their own for the next year or two at minimum. Companies in the Series C and D stage, they're getting slaughtered. Their valuation has just completely nosedived. And really, you kind of have to go for companies that are really large, like JPMC, or healthcare companies who are still doing okay, they're still hiring, or early stage companies. And people ask me, what is the staff designer? How do you separate one from a lead designer versus a senior designer? And that's a really difficult question. And my answer is, this is kind of a non-answer. It's the staff designer / the lead designer, whatever designer you want to call it, is the most talented candidate willing to work for that title and salary. That level will change depending on circumstances and market. So right now, everyone's kind of under-leveled a little bit because the market's so crappy. A lot of people who are staff-level designers are taking lead-level roles. And if you kind of wind the clock back by a year, a lot of people were being over-leveled because the market was so good back then. There's also a really good leveling guide under staff.design / resources. Please go there. They have all the leveling rubrics of major companies like GitLab and what else, I can't remember. But just reading it and how they separate between staff level, lead level, senior level is super important. You might not be able to do these things, but if you can speak the language, that's gonna take you really, really far, surprisingly. I always have this theory that, even though I don't really code that much, if I get trained by an engineer for like a year or two, just to like speak the language, like, oh, I know these APIs and all that, I can maybe get far enough in the interview process to land a job. And I think I do that with designers as well. So how do you become a staff designer? You want to talk to HR and senior managers because they're the ones who have documentation on leveling rubrics. Internally, the company has those documents. And you want to ask them, how does their company level these kind of roles? If they can share with you, wonderful. So again, building relationships, building rapport, building trust. That's basically how I learned about how do you get level as a staff designer, just by talking to other managers, getting them to share those details with you. So leveling typically happens during the interview process. Through round 1 to 4, whatever. They will decide, okay, this person is most likely a level L5 or L6 designer. And it's often too late to get re-level at the offer stage. So by the time they say, hey, we're gonna extend you an offer, you're gonna be making like $150K per year, That's usually too late. And there are exceptions, of course, but it's a lot harder to do it at the end. You want to be prepared from the very beginning. Leveling is also highly subjective and based on opinions of your interviewers and hiring managers. So even though there are leveling rubric documents, hiring managers tend to have very biased approaches to it. So some hiring managers really focus on visual design, other ones focus on information architecture, other ones focus on ability to take products from 0 to 1 and beyond. So that's pretty much it. I hope I didn't go over time. I create a bunch of random content on LinkedIn, mostly shit posting. You can find my talent agent website at collective.supply, and you can find my LinkedIn under HAXUCO. And I write stuff like this if you really piss off people. Oh, and I have a bonus. This lady, she is the PagerDuty CEO, I believe, and she, instead of saying laying off, she said, we're refining our operating model. And refinement we are implementing today includes completing and hitting roughly 7% of roles globally. And that's just, yeah, CEO speak is just, it's wonderful. I wish I could speak like that. That's why I'm not a CEO. Cool. Questions? Yes.
So, you know, I think oftentimes when you apply for a new job, you want to do something different. And the perception is that recruiters, when they're looking at your resume, they want to look for exactly the thing that will fit into the role that they're looking for. And sometimes those two things don't mix. It's like they don't care about your need for exploration and
Yeah,
to
why would
further
you care
yourself.
though? It's like,
Well, exactly. How do you, as on the kind of the applicant side, how do you subvert that a little bit? I want to move into something else. I want to do something different. How do I kind of convince the recruiter to take a look at me, even though my experience level maybe isn't exactly what you're looking for?
yeah, that's a great question because right now, with the way the market is, recruiters and hiring managers are looking for apples to apples comparison. So if you're a B2B designer and you're a B2C role, they're not going to give you a look because there's so many B2C people available to choose from. Why bother with someone like that, right? Because again, for you to convince them, it's going to take up their time, their energy. They don't want to give you that because there are so many people available that they can just talk to instantaneously, right? So it's like we're selling apples to people who live like 10 blocks away, and we cost like $1 per apple, and they have an apple cart next to them, the same apples as us, and it's 50 cents per apple, and it's 2 blocks away from them. How do you do that? There's only so much you can do. So right now might not be the best time to do that. I know that's kind of a shitty answer, but if you are really set on it, you need to identify and understand more about the needs for that area that you want to get into, whether it be B2C or AI stuff, or you want to work at so a big issue right now is a lot of agency designers want to go in-house, and that's really hard to do because in-house recruiters and hiring managers would say, you don't have enough experience taking a product from 0 to 1 and beyond. And that's not really fair, right? Because then you're on the back step. You're trying to figure out how do you prove to them that you can actually do that. So now you have to execute on that. So one thing, we're getting into territory of bad advice. You could potentially do your own projects, take it from 0 to 1 and beyond, right? You might have to take down level to work at a company where you have the opportunity to do something like that. Not ideal, but there are creative ways around it, and also you gotta build connections, relationships. I can't tell you the amount of times people get hired because somebody likes them. and it sucks for people like me because I am not that likable. but I have my moments. I've convinced a few people to like me enough to give me a chance. But there are other people out there who are phenomenal at building rapport, and that helps tremendously. So just consider all your tools, not just design capabilities, but your charisma as well. Yes.
What you've been explaining so far is ways to help that person who feels like I am perfect for this job, but I can't get hired. What can they best do to be hired by that company? On the flip side, what advice would you give to a company to find those that are perfect for the job?
Yeah, I mean, this is a challenge that I deal with every single day working with hiring managers who are very explicit in terms of what they want. They're like, you know, we have a bunch of FANG designers on the market and they're willing to take the salaries that they would never have taken before. Like, they're like, can you find me like a laid off FANG designer? I'm like, yeah, but you're paying 160K. Like, are you nuts? They're making like 380K or something at L7. Why would they take a, you know, 60-70% pay cut to work with you? They're like, well, they're kind of desperate. I'm like, yeah, you're kind of right, but second the market turns, they're gone. So really what I'm trying to find is value, right? You want to create value. So you want to identify people who are undervalued. It's kind of like Moneyball, right? You want to find players or designers who do not have the best skills in finding jobs, but they're really good at doing their day-to-day work. And that's kind of where I come in as an ex-designer turned recruiter, because I have the eye to say, this person is really damn good, even though, you know, their portfolio is garbage. But just trust me, just believe in me. You know, I can see the talent, and that requires a lot of trust. So if you are a designer, sorry, to answer your question, what should hiring managers do?
Well, let me give you a little bit more context. I'm starting up another nonprofit. We're just starting up, and it's a nonprofit, so we haven't raised money yet. We probably want to bring in the designer from the very beginning, either as a collaborator, a partner, whatever. Everything's open at this point. What advice would you give me to help our organization and any potential designers that are looking for work that may be perfect for this job?
Yeah, so polling favors, do you know any really good designers who are not willing to work for you because you're not paying them enough, but they're really, really good and you trust them, and have them do the hiring for you, and at least the early stages?
I wouldn't know who, no, I don't know anybody like that.
Okay, so you would then find a designer who is currently unemployed, but is really good, and you can pay them by the hour to recruit for you. Or you can talk to me afterward, but I would probably charge you quite a bit of money, so. Yes.
Hi, what's your advice to junior UX designers? Because obviously, like, there's a really good market for us right now, and as far as like, yeah, I've been doing a lot of freelance, volunteer kind of work, but even like, it's even hard to find like good work of that. Like, I feel like even the work I'm taking on isn't like necessarily gonna impress employers once the market's more attractive. So like, and then like kind of at a point where I'm like, I need to make more money. Like, how do I navigate this? Like,
Are you early career?
Huh?
Are you early career? Like, have you just started?
I'm a career transitioner, yeah.
Okay, great. So I was actually a career transitioner as well myself. I used to work as a photographer. I used to do sculpting, a bunch of shit that paid very little. Took me like 10 years to pay off my student loans, so fun times. But the best advice I have for people who are career transitioners is the mentality we have is typically, if I just learn these freaking skills, if I can just build this portfolio and have this experience, I would be able to get a job, right? That's the normal mentality. If I do these things and I gain these powers and these skills, I would be, you know, wanted in the field. And that is the wrong way to look at it, because you will never feel like you're good enough, and you will beat yourself up day after day. So it took me about a year to get my first job in UX, and that was the worst time of my life, literally. Like, I would not wish that on anyone. I would wake up early in the morning, and this is like years ago where there wasn't that much material online like free material to look at. I didn't have money for General Assembly, so I had to like learn stuff by reading crappy blog articles and like piecing stuff together. And I would work from 8 a.m. to however, you know, time for meetups, and I would go to meetup to get free food. right now. And then I would like network and meet with people and like build connections, and then I would come back and then do more work, and then on weekends I would do hackathons for 24, 48 hours. So I was like running myself to the ground. I was super depressed. It was not a good time. And looking back, what I could have done is been a lot more kind to myself. And the most important thing I should have focused on is my financial runway. So now the advice I give to career transitioners is always look at your financial runway. That people don't quit because they're not good enough at UX. They don't quit because they're like, oh, I can't hack it. This is too hard. They typically quit because they have to tap out financially. They ran out of financial runway. So if you can figure that out, like figure out some way where you are maximizing the amount of time you can spend on learning UX, because you have to be fully committed. People were like, I want to do this part-time. I'm just like, I believe in you, but at the same time, the market is so tough right now that you're competing against people who are doing this full-time, because they have the privilege of, say, the parents supporting them or whatever. You know, I lived at home at the time, fully willing to admit that. My parents paid for a lot of shit. I was also running off credit card debt at the time, so I owed a shit ton of money at like 20% interest rate. Do not do that. Bad idea. And if you, like going back in time, I would have been all kinder to myself, figure out my financial runway, not go into debt, and then focus on that. Instead of saying, oh, I need to learn all these things by this date, otherwise I won't be able to find a job. Because the threshold of finding a job is so nebulous. It's not like you do all these things, check, 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 you get a job. It's not like that. It's very complicated, and there are all these things that can like kind of fall into place for you. It's not like law school where you get your diploma and then you get an internship and then you pass the bar exam. Now you're a lawyer. It's not like that. It's like very difficult. I equate it to like dating. It's like, you don't check off the boxes, but people's advice might be, okay, you gotta shower often. You need to like cut your hair. You need to like not be a dick to people, and like all these things are generally true. And if you do all these things, eventually you might find someone that will marry you. And what I'm saying is, financial runway is important. So focus on that and maintain your mental health. These two are the most important things. Everything else is bullshit. Like, yeah.
Just to follow up, do you feel like maybe like prioritizing that versus like finding a job? Like I'm worried about having like any type of gaps, like you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
what's your advice on like,
You're a career transitioner. Why would I care about your gaps? Like I used to be a photographer. They don't give a shit. I used to be a photographer. They don't care about unemployed. It's the same thing. Photographer, unemployed, sculptor. Now I'm a designer, right? So don't worry about that. Don't worry so much about what other people think. That's just living with yourself and that voice in your head is like the toughest thing. Don't make it worse.
Right.
Yeah.
I know there is a couple of hands raised, but we do need to kind of start to mosey out and get out of this space. No, it just means your talk was just so inspirational, and it's just like piqued everyone's interest. I realized there was a slide, but I don't really know.
Okay, well, we'll just verbalize the slide.
Oh, sure.
Or we'll switch
Password?
back.
I don't know the password.
Oh,
Oh,
there we go.
okay. Second tab.
Okay, cool. So this is, yeah, everyone, thanks for coming. We will hope everyone enjoyed themselves, and we should definitely give another round of